So hello and welcome to this session. We're very lucky to have Mike Bastin, MA Pathway Co-ordinator for Fashion Marketing and Branding here today. And Mike's expertise in fashion brand management has been recognised globally, and his current research work examines the integration of traditional Chinese elements with a more modern design approach in Chinese fashion brands. And Mike worked and lived in China for 7 years, teaching at leading Chinese universities, as well as delivering training programs to international businesses based across China, and still holds a visiting professorship at the University of International Business and Economics, a top-ranked Chinese university. And today he's here to give an overview of the Chinese labour market, its current challenges, and advice and guidance for those looking for work in China soon. So over to you, Mike.
Okay, can you see me, everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone say yes. Yeah. So I think if you mute, just for background noise, if you mute your microphones, and I'll start. I've got a presentation, PowerPoint presentation. This is being recorded, so you'll get that. In terms of Q&A, I'm happy to take questions in the chat. So if you've got anything that comes to mind, put it in the chat, and then at convenient times I'll stop and try and answer that, so we get some dialogue going throughout, and it's not just me talking for quite a length of time. I don't want that. So fire away with all your questions. We've got an hour and a half, and I'm very happy to use all of that if necessary. I suspect we probably won't need that amount of time, and you probably want a bit of a break possibly before your next session or the next thing you attend. But anyway, let's. So I'm Mike Bastin. Some of you may know me, MA Fashion Marketing and Branding Program Leader at WSA, have been for a number of years, and I have a China background. So I'm going to share my screen with you now and go into my PPT. So if you can give me the heads up when. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm going to talk about the labour market in China and hopefully give you some pointers, some tips and techniques on future career once you return to China, based on my Chinese contacts, my time in China, my studies in China, and links with Chinese businesses and Western businesses in China. So, and that's my email. So I'm always here. If you've got follow-up questions, by all means, just chuck me an email, and I'll be very, very happy to reply. So let's get going. It was a very nice introduction. Thank you for that. And I've put it on here. So my China story. So in 1996, I first went to China. Very exciting time for me. So a long time ago, China was very different then. And I traveled around, and I did a little bit of teaching, international marketing teaching, and made some links, and became fascinated with the culture, the evolution of the economy, the integration of the economy with the Western economy. And this led to more and more work out there. Is my English clear, first of all?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. By all means, fire away with questions, and I'll come back to the chat in a minute. But this is fairly self-explanatory. As Heather said, I actually lived and worked in China. I was based in Beijing for a number of years. You can see 7 years, and that was very, very a great insight. And as a result of those 7 years, I have very, very strong links and contacts. And I still return for about a month. Obviously, last year didn't, for about a month every year, and do some media work, some guest lecturing, and maintain links with businesses. So you'll see my name out there with a lot of things I've written about China, and mainly focusing on fashion branding. Okay, so there you go. So I do quite a few things, which I think helps me connect with China, which is, as we know, evolving and changing and even more fascinating than it was before. And there's my web page as well, if you want to look at that for future reference. But you've got my email address, so I'm always happy to field questions as and when. So let's begin. Let's start by, I'm going to give you some information, some websites. Some of this you'll know, but I'm going to perhaps surprise a few of you with some tips and techniques as well. And before we start, there, the thing is, it is competitive. It's a competitive market, and we need to be patient, and we need to keep going. You know, hopefully a bit of luck, and you'll have that brilliant job soon, and you're well on your way to a good career. I did my first master's back in the day at the University of Southampton, and looking back, it opened doors immediately. You know, I'm very, very glad I did. So the first thing is to stress your competitive advantage. Make sure that comes through in your CV, your covering letter, any correspondence. So it's not just the fact that you've got a lot of knowledge, whether it's fashion marketing and branding, whether it's in the engineering sector. I mean, Southampton University have some brilliant programs. Yes, a world-class university. So you're gaining in knowledge. But certainly what Chinese companies and Western companies in China will value are these skills, okay? So soft skills, so emphasize those, and the fact that you can now, you've actually worked in a different culture for a period of time. A lot of your opportunities or your real advantage will be there as an interface between UK and China. And I do a little bit of work with Chinese contacts on that as well. So you're very, very well placed to help Western brands expand in China, and also Chinese brands, wherever you're based, expand internationally. And we'll see more of both of that, I think more integration. So be positive, looking long term. You're in a very, very good position. Obviously, the current world economy is not strong, but you are very, very well placed. You know? So emphasize these soft skills, multicultural environment, knowledge of Western business culture. I did a lot of training in Beijing with quite senior managers across many sectors, investment banking, the media, who needed advice on Western business culture, Western etiquette, how to do business, how to negotiate, some basic principles. So I think for a lot of Chinese companies, internationalizing is still a little bit of fear, a step into the unknown. You can reduce that fear. You can come in and help most definitely. Okay, so those are to be emphasized. Don't forget about those. So it's not just promoting your knowledge. In my case, fashion brands and Western fashion brands, but all these soft skills as well. Just a few tips before we start looking at websites, and I've got a real live job for us to look at as well. The CV, again, must highlight this competitive advantage. So it's clear, concise. Hopefully you've got an English version and a Chinese version. Your key target, for me, I mean, there's all sorts of job opportunities out there, but where you can really make this competitive advantage sort of maximize this is with Sino-UK alliances, and we'll see more of those, particularly with Brexit. More UK companies will be looking more seriously at China, and more Chinese companies will looking to expand internationally into Europe and the UK, and that's where you come in. And Chinese friends of mine have got good jobs by taking this on board. Where to focus in China? Obviously, we tend to think of the first-tier cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and for obvious reasons, and those are still attractive. What I would say, from my experience talking to my Chinese contacts, in the longer term, and maybe even the short term, this is happening, we will see second-tier cities, particularly along the Belt and Road initiative, become more attractive. So it's worth looking at those now. If you can get in there early, when it's perhaps not as attractive as the first-tier cities now, there's no reason to say that it won't be in the future. So I would look long-term and see a career path where you don't necessarily have to rely on a first-tier city. And obviously, we've seen with the pandemic, where you are is becoming less important. Yeah. And at the end, I've put, what do our students get over the sort of MA Fashion Marketing and Branding students over the last few years, and those that I've kept in touch with or kept in touch with us. For Western brands in China, the key challenge for them is the shifting media landscape and social media, obviously WeChat, Weibo, TikTok, and how to use that well. And they're getting better at it, but only because they're employing talented Chinese professionals. I think that there's an opportunity for you there, regardless of your master's. Obviously, if you have a master's in a related area, all the better, but certainly be aware of that and start targeting your job search on Western brands in China, expanding, and need a strong social media presence, need to understand how Chinese consumers use social media. They haven't heard of the Wanhong. Typically, they won't be aware of the meaning of WeChat and the usage, and that's really where you have an advantage. So put that in your in your locker as well. Any questions at this stage? And Sophie, is there anything in the chat that I could respond to?
Nothing in the chat yet, Mike.
Okay. Anybody? No? Do fire away with any questions. Okay, let's carry on. I've got quite a few slides. And we will come on to some websites soon. In terms of expanding across China, obviously I think the term is haigui. Returning Chinese students have a lot to offer. But sometimes I don't think Chinese companies really value that. They perhaps fear the returning Chinese student. You're probably aware of this, and fear there's a change in mentality, a fear that they're a sort of change in the balance of power, and the senior management feel a little bit, especially if they haven't been internationally educated and they haven't traveled that much. And many Chinese companies are in that situation. So just be careful how you promote yourself. Okay, I'm not saying you will try to oversell yourself or your expectations will be seen as too high, but just be a little bit exercise humility, be a little bit humble. Okay, so you're very well qualified, you've got a brilliant career ahead of you, most definitely, but for that to start and to continue at a pace, it's important to fit in to a certain extent, and make it clear that you're still very deferential, very respectful. And again, coming back to these soft skills, where you can really help is the fact that you've been educated in an environment where you interact with different cultures, you present different cultures, you have to develop critical thinking, critical arguments, critical judgment. And that's really what modern business is all about. Particularly Chinese companies expanding need that, and they are doing that well. But with you on board, I'm sure they could do that much better. Okay, so just a few key tips, and these are the things that we often say. We'll say to UK students as well. Okay, you've got your big masters from your Russell Group University. When you get that brilliant job in London or wherever in New York, just remember that we show respect at all times, and people know that you're coming with a lot to offer, but they may be a little bit fearful. Okay, so allay their fears. Okay, present yourself as very, very respectful and humble, which I'm sure you will anyway. Okay, the labour market in China. So where are we? I'll go to the second point first. The Chinese economy is still set to grow. I mean, 6% is very, very healthy. It's not the 10%, 11% we saw for many, many years. This is what we call the new normal. But certainly it's forecast to grow far more than any other major economy. Okay, so that's the good news. Okay, recovered from COVID quicker than most. An excellent job now. My contacts in China say, we're just about there. And if there is an outbreak, it's stamped on very, very quickly. So very, very effective. So that's the good news. Obviously, it's going to take time for the economic activity to really pick up. And job opportunities may suffer a little because China depends so much for trade with the West, the EU in particular, and the US, and those economic areas have suffered much, much more and don't have the sort of clear way forward that China has. So we've got to be a little bit patient, but generally inside China, things are picking up, and we see that with all sorts of activities. We've just had Chinese New Year, Singles Day last year, again, record amounts spent. So there is economic activity, and people are feeling more and more confident. And again, coming back to the Belt and Road, the first-tier cities are still dominant, but the central government, as we know, are determined to reduce that dominance and determined to facilitate wealth generation in second and third tier cities, particularly near those first tier cities. So don't just target the obvious Shanghai, Beijing. Fierce competition, the labour market, obviously a large population of in your demographic range, but you have obvious advantages. Present those in a modest way, so modest presentation of the benefits that you have, and it will open doors. And again, more good news is that China is opening up more, so that the Chinese government are doing this quite gradually, which I can understand quite correctly. But integration of the Chinese economy will lead to more opportunities for foreign companies in China as well. And you're ideally placed there, particularly with your English language skills. Most of the foreign companies I know that are looking at China, there's 2 local companies that I work with, depend entirely on China and Chinese students and Chinese professionals. They have very, very little idea, particularly small companies, and then have time and resources to really research the market and no understanding of the language. So again, once again, you are very, very well placed. Anybody got anything? I'm talking away, going through the slides. Anything? Do let me know. So certainly if something comes in the chat, anybody wants to just type something in the chat. You maybe have an idea yourself, and then I can give you my opinion on the way forward and your career path. Okay. I picked out the 2 biggest cities, and obviously these are still very, very attractive options, and I know salaries are much higher. Western business will almost certainly have a base in one or both of these, and you see all the big names there, and obviously Chinese companies will want to have a base here as well. Beijing still has that high technology focus. Obviously Lenovo's based there. Guanxi, the business park just outside Beijing, where I've worked, I've delivered training programs there. So certainly in terms of high technology, and also tourism. Tourism has suffered obviously with the pandemic, but most, I think more and more foreign tourists do realize that Shanghai has tremendous appeal, tremendous scenery and sights, Yuan Gardens, for example, the Huangpu, the Bund. But Beijing really has the cultural delights, obviously with the Great Wall and the Forbidden City, Summer Palace, Temple of Heaven. So certainly there may be opportunities for you there in the tourism sector, and the service sector generally is growing and growing. Okay, I think it's about 50-50 with manufacturing, but obviously as economies develop, it's the service sector that develops. And I think in the UK now it's at 70-80% is service. So the service sector may well be something you target, and it may well be tourism, travel, and you're looking at really building a career in that sector and start looking at jobs in that sector. Gradually, your career will be defined by an industry and industry knowledge, and it's quite difficult to switch from industry, not impossible, from industry to industry later on. When you've got 10 years experience in tourism, it makes sense to stay there. So certainly Beijing, high technology, tourism. Shanghai, obviously, financial services, as we all know, really the financial hub of the region, really, not just the country. The Shanghai Stock Exchange, the big one. But also the fashion industry, my industry that I teach in, and I've worked in for quite a few years now. The Shanghai Fashion Show is becoming increasingly international. It also has a real focus on local talent and Chinese fashion and Chinese elements in fashion, which is really my interest, strong interest and research activity now. So certainly in those areas, fashion and related areas, you're likely to be targeting Shanghai more than Beijing, but obviously Beijing will have some of that as well. Both will have some of all of these. So that may be a focus. But again, the point I'm making here is don't assume that second and third tier cities aren't ready yet. Okay, the salaries may not be there now, but they could be soon in the future. Some of the academics that I've worked with, a professor at Nottingham University, took a job at Chongqing University, and he's been paid more at Chongqing University than he was being paid as a full professor at the University of Nottingham. So I think that's a good example. And one of the reasons he cited was that he sees career progression there more as well in Southwest China, looking longer term. And that surprised me. That was a few years ago, but that did surprise me. So, it's happening in education. Why should it not happen in other industries and other sectors? Okay. These are some links that I'll leave you with. This is something I've sort of used to sort of confirm my knowledge, build my knowledge, and looking at trends in the labour market. And you'll see some key points that I'm really alluding to here in my talk about how the Chinese labour market is a key imperative. It's a key imperative of the Chinese government to improve employable or employability prospects and career prospects for the Chinese graduate, particularly from foreign education, international education. They see that as a priority. So look at that as a positive. And I think we'll see government policy initiatives over the next few years to facilitate career paths for you, because they recognize that further modernization, further international integration of the Chinese economy, Chinese companies, will happen much more quickly and more effectively with people like yourselves. So you are really change agents. You're really there to really help Chinese companies. And again, whilst you may see a Western company as providing better salary in China, better training, I would go with the Chinese company, because I think longer term, you will do even better. And I really do believe that. So there's a few slides. Still anybody? I'll sort of pause for
we
a
have
bit.
got some questions in the chat, Mike.
Go
okay.
on. Go on.
Firstly, we've got, what skills need to be improved to enter the marketing department of the fashion industry to deal with a lack of practiced marketing experience? So
it's it's a very, very good question. And I'll come back to, you can see this, I'll come back to the sort of key skills in fashion marketing. Obviously, a lot of you are very, very well qualified, but you're just starting your careers. You can't sort of somehow create 3 years experience when you don't have it, or 5 years when you just don't have it. It doesn't mean to say you won't be employed and you're not employable. In many ways, that could be a positive, because companies realize they can train you in the way that they want you to develop and their company to develop. Key skills then, though, in fashion, obviously creative skills and communication skills are very, very important. Your role in fashion will involve a lot of communication with a lot of outside suppliers, intermediaries, not just inside your company, the supply chain. So it's really about being confident and having a little bit of charisma about you. So not afraid to use a little bit of humor. Also critical thinking, critical skills, and showing good judgment. So it's a full range of soft skills, really, that, again, this is why I put here, highlight those on your CV. It's not, when they choose, and I've got some good contacts. I mean, 2 years ago, a student of ours got a job, MA Fashion Marketing Branding, for Celine in Shanghai, and worked on the retail training program they have for retail analysts, retail managers. And she put me in touch with Celine recruitment team, and they came back to me. They were very interested. And the last time I was in Shanghai, which is the year before last, I met the lady and still have good contacts with her. And we had a chat over coffee and lunch. And of course, I asked her, what are you looking for when you recruit people in fashion? And the first word she said was passion for fashion. So you genuinely, and I think most of you are, you genuinely love the industry. So it's almost like a professional sports person, actually, or someone who's mad about sport, who actually becomes a professional and can't quite believe it. I'm actually being paid for something that I would do for nothing. So I think the key answer is a range of the soft skills, but also when it comes to fashion, just a passion for that industry and what it can do for people. You so firmly believe that fashion is a huge part of people's lives, their identity. It's not just functional. Does that help?
That's really a great insight, actually, and it really overlaps with us. I'll put my camera on. It really overlaps with what we were talking about in the fashion panel earlier this week, and so that's obviously a common denominator throughout the industry. There's another question here, Mike, if you're happy to take it.
I will. Can I just, something I thought of about that question as well, the lady at Celine did say, obviously there's a lot of international travel as well, and she's in France or in Paris all the time, as you might expect. So your English language skills and your knowledge of Western culture is highly appreciated. And she did say in the Celine office in Shanghai, they often communicate in English as well, particularly when they're about to go on a business trip, just to get their English up to speed and feel confident. So having that English language skills is very important for fashion. Sorry, go on then, Anne-Sophie.
Okay. We have a question about a particular employer in China. Oh, I think someone needs to switch the mic off.
Oh yeah, can you mute? Thank you. Otherwise I'll start dancing.
We a student who's looking to work for a particular employer. I always dreamed of working for Shanghai Disneyland, and my major is now in global media management. Do you have any advice for me about this entering employment with this employer, and which attributes should I pay more attention to?
Okay, do I need to come on camera? Should I stop sharing or should I just answer?
If you finished your presentation, just go for it. Yeah.
No, I haven't, not at all. I'm going to bore them with lots more stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a very good question. I mean, we actually took the kids the year before last to Shanghai Disney, and I was very impressed, having been to Paris. Where else have we been? No, we haven't been to America yet. With the service levels, and the organisation generally. Getting into Shanghai Disney, first of all, I think that's a very, very good target. And I think the entertainment and the creative sector is set to flourish in China. So not just fashion. And I think that's the central government have made that a focal point of their, the further development, the next layer of economic development. Specifically, what role? I mean, I think what I tend to say to students is, I mean, there'll be a number of opportunities in the marketing department. And what students often look for as early as possible is a creative role. Okay, so you're working on creative design, creating, for example, the website. So I think that would be a good opportunity to get in with your marketing skills on creating a website, obviously with your English language skills in both languages. Okay, so a very, very colorful, creative website, I think will be one opportunity where I'm sure that Shanghai Disney would value very, very highly. The other thing that I tend to recommend this much more, in terms of climbing the ladder quickly in any company, let alone Shanghai Disney, it's about visibility. Yeah, so you can be brilliant, have some brilliant ideas, but if no one really sees them or credits them with you, you very often don't get the credit. And that tends to happen in a highly visible, some more visible roles will be in the planning area, so strategic planning, so marketing planning, so putting together a strategy for Shanghai Disney going forward and how it should evolve and modify and change its brand image according to different tourists, different countries, different contexts. So I would be looking at a strategic marketing role, strategic branding role, where you're looking to reposition perhaps Shanghai Disney, obviously competition from Tokyo. How is it different? And I think what we'll see is that Western tourists will value the Chineseness more. So I think going forward, it will have a stronger and stronger Chinese identity that uses Chinese cultural elements, traditional elements. Does that help? Hello?
I presume that was a yes, Mike.
Okay. They can shout out. Anything else? Anybody else? I mean, you can unmute. If you want to ask a question, you need to unmute, yeah? Don't forget to unmute. No? Should I carry on? Yeah?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some sources there. You're probably aware of these, but I'll just go over them in terms of key sites and working in China, you've got obviously 51job.com, and I was very fortunate when I first moved to China. I did my second master's at Warwick Business School, and one of the founder members of 51job.com, Wang Tao, he's a Warwick old boy, and I met up with him several times through the alumni database. So that will lead me on to, I'll bring it up now, things like networking and alumni and the contacts you have now. Cherish those, build on those. So what may be seen as just a nice friendship could turn into a real business opportunity if you know the right person. So he gave me a tour of the office. He told me a lot about what they were focusing on. And even then he said the focus really was expanding 51job.com across many cities with a view to being ready for recruitment in far more cities than just the big four. Yeah. And Jiaopin.com, which I think you're probably familiar with. Not sure if you're familiar with asoffer.cn. And also I've got a few more here, and I put the websites for 51. Chinajob.com. GradLink China, if you look at that one, that's a graduate community, a sort of I don't know, a graduate LinkedIn thing where you've got an opportunity to just register. Have people registered here or looked at that? I'm not going to click on it now, but if you click on that and register, you should find yourself part of a graduate community. Obviously, you've got Southampton University alumni database as well. These things can help immensely. When I first started going to China in 1996, the first thing I did was go on to the Warwick University of Warwick Business School alumni database and just type in China. And I was amazed. I had about well over 100 former Warwick students who had studied at Warwick and were in China, and most of them were Chinese. And I was going to Beijing, and I met up with 3 or 4 of them, and one was in an advertising agency. So we had a fascinating talk about how advertising had to become less Western, a fusion of Western and the Chinese elements, which is a theme that I think will run across many sectors. So you can have a look at those later. Again, My Job Tank, you may not be familiar with these, but all sorts of platforms are springing up all over the place. So don't just go for the usual sites. So keep looking at the internet, keep surfing the internet for any new platforms, recruitment sites. Anybody can set up one very, very quickly. It's very low cost, but those are some of the most common. And hopefully they're helpful. And this is being recorded, so you've got those. Obviously, you're targeting Chinese companies, you're targeting British companies, European companies who will value very, very highly, particularly if you can present your Western knowledge and knowledge of Western culture. They need you to expand across China. They just cannot. They can't do it. I moved to China. I had to move to China to try to really understand the culture a bit more. I never will, like a Chinese person, never. But I understand it much better now because I lived there and it was my home for 7 years. So Indeed.co.uk and Read.co.uk are 2 of the major websites for companies, and they have sections on China, okay, and companies who are in China now. And the other thing is to keep reading the news. So if you're in fashion, read the fashion news, and where you see news of a Chinese brand or a Western brand in China, maybe doing well, maybe not doing that well. We see Gucci's results aren't very good recently. Not quite the big name that they were, the automatic sort of top dog as they were, and particularly in China. When you see a news item, that needs to register, and that really needs to again modify your strategy accordingly. And there's nothing to stop you writing letters to senior personnel whose email addresses you can get in these companies, introducing yourself, cold calling. That can lead to job opportunities. So don't just look at jobs that are advertised. Okay. I targeted these, and I've got a couple of links here because I really do think, and again, you can click on these later. I'm not going to go on them right now. A focal point, I think, for Western business and for Chinese business now, obviously, and not just fashion now, and particularly with the pandemic, people are buying online, much more comfortable staying at home. That will probably continue to a certain extent, even when hopefully we're on top of the virus and the vaccines have rolled out, and that's looking much, much brighter now here. So social media is the key to building your brand, whether it's fashion, whatever the brand. And understanding social media across China is very, very different. There's a cultural component there, as you know. A typical Chinese social media consumer is much more attached. The relationship with WeChat and the Chinese consumer is very different to the relationship with, say, a British consumer, a social media consumer, and Instagram. Okay, you know the differences, you know the meaning, you know the depth, you know what people are doing on there and how much they are influenced. Yeah, so you have Wei Ya and Li Jiaqi, these influences in China. We don't really have those here. You've got Kim K. A lot of them are established stars like Harry Styles, who we all know, very influential. But it's a different landscape in China, and particularly Western brands, and maybe Chinese brands with a more senior, sort of older senior management, can't unlock the social media channel to their advantage. You can, so that's a real advantage, particularly if you're, you are even the sort of the Zhou I think most of you are probably Zhou and not Ba. There's a big difference there, as you know, in China, and I think you've really got that attitude. You've grown up with digital technology, so that's a big competitive advantage that you have. Anything else in the chat? No? Okay, I've got a few more slides. I did say, I think we're probably looking at 45, 50 minutes, so I'll wrap up soon. I pulled this off the internet, market analyst job in Shanghai. And the reason I did this was just to get you to appreciate how important it is to study. When you do find that job, you do find something you think, this is for me. And then you might think, if you look at the second point, the ideal candidate should have at least 3 years working experience in the financial service industry. And you might think, I don't have that. Still apply. If they are asking for 10 to 15 years or 20 years of senior management, obviously, and you're just starting in your career, don't apply. But if it's just 2 or 3, there may be other jobs, there may be other opportunities. Yeah. So don't automatically write off something where you don't have the experience if they're not asking for that much experience. And even if you see your career in financial services and you have, let's say you have a degree in general business of management, great, still apply. Okay. You've got to start somewhere. Yeah. And the key thing here is to study the key words. So the key opportunity, the key reason why some students get interviews, get job offers, is because they get that covering letter or that opening email spot on. So what are they really looking at? What do they really want? Okay, what is absolutely essential and what is desirable? And very few things you'll find are absolutely essential. So this is the ideal candidate, and that ideal candidate is very rarely out there. So spread the net far and wide. Don't just go for things where, I've got 1 year experience. So if they ask for 1 year, I'll apply. If it's 2, I won't apply. Still apply if it's close enough. Okay, so I was going to ask you to do a little bit of an exercise and highlight the key words. What do you think is most important here? Anybody? I mean, there's an email address there with your CV, probably a covering letter in the email as well. There's a lot of positives for you there. If you look at the second point, the final sentence, overseas work experience is also welcome to apply. So you can see that this is an internationalizing company that values you and the international education, not just because of your knowledge, perhaps of financial services, but your experience in a different culture. And that says a lot about you. You're very, very confident, very, very much self-starter. Yeah. And the other thing to come to bring to your attention in terms of presenting yourself positively and improving your chances of getting that ideal job, once perhaps you see that or something similar, it might be market analyst in fashion, for example. What companies are looking for? Well, I said you want modesty. You want to show that you a bit of humility. You don't sort of think you're guaranteed a really good salary because you've invested so much in an international education. They want people who have a bit of character, a bit of entrepreneurial character. I've used that adjective. People with these characteristics. So people who are really looking for ideas and doing things a bit differently. Consumers are different, markets are different. There's a lot of uncertainty. For brands to succeed, not just in fashion, they're going to have to really look at their core appeal and perhaps change drastically. Luxury fashion now merging with streetwear and athwear, Louis Vuitton getting involved in that. Who would have thought about that 5-10 years ago? The world's changing, targeting a younger demographic. Never accept failure, and that's true with job search as well. Everything's an opportunity. If you get an interview, you don't get the job, you learn from it. You learn from the interview. There is progress being made. And self-belief and determination. So it's just something you just keep on going. You just get on with it. So I think that's important, these characteristics that need to come through in your CV. And you've already demonstrated a lot of this by pursuing an international education. I'd like to think I did something similar when I went to China. Friends of mine thought, what are you doing? Where are you going? You've got a lovely life here. And I said, no, I want the challenge. I want to understand that culture more, learn the language a little bit. It's just a fascinating experience. And I think that says perhaps a lot about my character. Many people wouldn't have done that and still don't understand why I did that. But it's the best thing I ever did. And Beijing will always be part of me. Just some do's and don'ts before hopefully there might be a few more questions. The covering letter, that covering email is very, very important. And you probably had training with this. I know the Careers Service offer tremendous guidance there, so do use them. The professionals in there are very, very good, very conscientious, and I've worked well with them over the last few years. That covering letter needs to be short, okay? So we don't want long stories about what you've been doing, just clear, concise, and for each job job description, perhaps have 2 columns: what's essential and what's desirable. So as an exercise, what you could do is, with friends, pull off jobs from the internet which you think are suitable for you and you really would like real jobs, and try to draw up an essentials list and a desirables list and see what your friends come up with as well. And that gives you a very, very good start at this opening paragraph where you hit on the essentials and how you've got those, or you're striving to get those skills, that experience. Okay, so that opening paragraph, very, very important. Interview, obviously practice with friends. Online interviews very common now, so expect more of those. It doesn't really matter where you are so much. I've noticed this even with Chinese companies now, certainly with Western companies in China, never discuss salary at interview. You may have probably what would be described as a poor interviewer who may sort of ask you what you're looking for, but it's really about the experience, what you can bring to the company. That's what you got to get across. Ask questions. What can I do to help this company? Okay, and research thoroughly. And have a lot to say. Be chatty at interviews. Someone who wants to ask questions as well as be asked questions. And salary doesn't come into it until you get that job offer and you get it in writing, and then the negotiation or the discussion can start. But really, it's about looking long term, what training opportunities, and you can double your salary very quickly if you're in the right job. It just takes care of itself, really. And then finally, the Guanxi, the networking. Be thinking about that now. So your classmates, people you may play sport with, hobbies and interests, keep in touch with them as a friend, and not just looking at it as a networking opportunity, but your friends can often open doors, unlock doors. Even your tutors, I do tell my students, keep in touch. It's very rewarding when you hear about them getting good jobs in China, and some of them still keep in touch, which is very, very happy. Any friends, any classmates. So there's that network is probably bigger than you realize, and build those links and maintain those links. So when you do go back to China, make sure you get an email off to the people and friends and contacts you have here soon, and keep in touch. It's very easy to let that slip. And with that, I've been going on for quite some time. I'm going to stop sharing and come back. And Sophie, is there anything in the
We haven't got anything in the chat at this time. If you want to pop your questions in the chat.
That's the end of my slides. Hopefully that was useful, and probably quite a few things that you already did know, but hopefully sort of confirming some tips and techniques. You've got my email address as well in the recording, so yeah, by all means drop me an email. It's good for me to find out what Chinese students want to do, what career paths they're looking at. Obviously I'm primarily focused on fashion, and if let's just see, I'll put the chat up. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat now. Is there anything new? Okay, hello, I found, yes, this is a new question. Okay, so I found that there are many opportunities for retail management trainee in Beijing and Shanghai, but few Sorry, did I lose that question?
The question is, hello, I found out there are many opportunities for retail management trainees in Beijing and Shanghai, but few in the marketing department. Is there any way to improve my competitiveness in the marketing department? Thank you very much, they say.
Did I have that question? Okay, I'll answer that question then.
I think, is it the same question from us earlier?
I think it was, yes. Is that a new, and the thumbs up maybe, yeah. Well, perhaps I'll just go back over a few things. Marketing is exciting. It's sort of jazzy, and it is, and it's a tremendous career opportunity. And when I talked about visibility in marketing, you have visibility. What you're doing, you're what we call the sharp end of the business. You're dealing directly with the customer. I think social media marketing will improve your competitiveness. So not just your knowledge of the Chinese social media market and then social media platforms, but also your knowledge of changes in Chinese consumer behavior and which platforms they're using, which influencers are most influential, and what that meaning really is. And I think that will improve your competitiveness because, like I said, Western companies, but not just Western Chinese companies, are relying more and more on social media as their main reach and way of reaching particularly younger consumers, particularly with the pandemic. That's accelerated that as well. So you improve your competitiveness immediately if you present yourself as looking at not just marketing, but social media marketing, and you have expertise and you've gathered information and maybe some experience in that area. Yeah.
There's another question here, Mike. Does the marketing department prefer people with work experience?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, marketing is a different department. All departments. Okay, here's the downside. If you have a certain amount of work experience, it generally is a good thing, most definitely. And even if you have a few internships, it generally is a good thing. So yeah, we can't deny that. If you're applying for a marketing department and you don't have any work experience, particularly in marketing, you can present that as an opportunity because you can say you're fresh and you're ready to be trained in the culture of that department and that particular product range and specialize. And therefore, not having any sort of baggage from previous work experience could be an advantage. And I think they would look at that positively. And also they would look at it positively because they can then train you in the way they want you to, they want to, they can see you develop. They're probably not going to have to invest as much in terms of salary if you haven't got any work experience, but that can change very quickly. So I say this to my students, you've got to start somewhere. I don't think I can't get on, they want internships here, internships there. If I was in your position, I had no work experience, but I really wanted to specialize in an area of fashion, let's say luxury fashion, or luxury swimwear or something. These are growth areas now that perhaps weren't there before. Convince this company that you are the person to help them because this is your long-term passion, and you're so keen to get those first few years of work experience. Okay. Anything else?
There's another question. Yes, it's what do you think about designer brands in China?
I think they will grow. I think it's a very, very positive future. Do you mean Chinese designer brands? I think let's just assume that. I think the future is very, very bright in your case. I'm not just saying this, and I've been saying this for many, many years. I think it's only a matter of time before Chinese brands become more and more strong internationally, and Chinese designer brands and Chinese designers, and not just the likes of, you've probably heard of Guopei, obviously you know these, particularly those that have been Western educated, are very, very successful internationally now. So I think very high quality and a very, very attractive future. And I think many consumers outside China would value that Chineseness, those Chinese elements. I think the majority of tourists, vast majority of tourists who go to China are looking for modern China, most definitely, and different regional cultures. But perhaps they're really looking for that taste of Chinese history and ancient cultures and what that means. So bringing that into your fashion brands, I think, will be very appealing. And again, you're well placed to do that. Okay.
That's great. We've got nothing in the chat now. I'm going to put my camera back on and
okay.
Oh, we haven't got another question. When I was in China, I was mainly engaged in the public relations industry. Many Chinese companies prefer marketing as the main requirement for public relations or confuse the results of advertising and public relations. Is this the reason for localization? We're ending on a really easy one there, Mike.
Wow, that's a very, very good question. First thing I will say is that it does ring a bell that the students that we do know about who get, I mean, many of them get very, very good jobs, and I'm thinking of a couple in particular who are in Beijing. They're in public relations as well. It depends how you define these terms. It's quite difficult to answer those because public relations is a tricky one. There's marketing PR and there's PR. We often separate the two. So PR will be corporate public relations, where you're looking at the corporate image, and those people will be based very close to the senior management, the chief executive, the board members. Marketing PR will really merge and blend with advertising and tactical promotions and look at things like sponsorships, celebrity endorsement, that sort of thing. So I think it depends where you draw the line. And I think marketing PR is sufficiently close to many of the tactical promotions tools. So I think you can flit around those. I'm not sure. Does that help? I think that the typical Chinese company, if we want to talk about marketing and where they are, I think that the problem they've had in the past is that they've been quite strong tactically and sales pushes and price discounts. They haven't been thinking strategically, and they haven't been thinking about building strategic brands, and they haven't been strong on positioning and having an emotional position in your mind. It's about selling and getting it out there. But that's changing now. And I think they do realize they've got to play a longer term game and have that brand strategy rather than just try and get out there, keep the price down and hope the money comes in. So I think in terms of your careers, those that do fashion marketing, branding, fashion management, any business and management education, you really should be looking to convince and persuade Chinese companies that you're the person to help them build long-term a competitive brand nationally and internationally. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
We've got no more questions in the chat, or have we? Maybe this could be a last one. What do I need to fully... Can you see that one?
I can see part of it. I'm not sure why I can't see.
Oh, I see. Okay.
What do I need to
fully prepare before establishing my own business in the fashion industry? We make that the last question. That would take us up to the hour perfectly.
Lots of you need some sort of startup plan. So you need some sort of business plan, okay, where you have a very clear target market, and not just age group, and a very clear competitive advantage for your fashion brand image? What and how is it going to be different from your competitors? Okay, so you need to go through the steps of a typical startup plan, a business plan, most definitely. You may not stick to that. And one thing I will say that being an entrepreneur and looking to start your own business is great, and I'm really excited when students come to me with that idea, particularly when they're young. I think it's great that I'm going to do it my way, and I want to look back and I want to have a go. One thing that they overlook is finance. So you need some financial analysis skills. You need to understand and be able to put together a cash flow forecast. Cash flow kills. Biggest reason why small businesses go bust. Products are brilliant, haven't got any money in the bank to pay the creditors. And you need to be able to read a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. And that is not as difficult as you think. Not as difficult at all. And again, if you want to come back to me via email, I can put you onto some good sources. So I think that's the one thing to think of. Obviously, you need that passion, that drive and belief in your brand, but you also need to be market oriented. So you do need a little bit of market research just to confirm that your idea could be successful.
Perfect.
Okay.
Mike, there were over 50 students in attendance in this session.
Oh, great.
You've got such a unique and valuable expertise in this area within our institution. So we're really lucky, and particularly at this time. And I know the students in this session will have learned a lot and gained an up-to-date insight, which is really key, isn't it, to the current Chinese labour market and how to approach their future. And again, a huge thank you, and a recording of this session will be posted onto the University of Southampton Careers and Employability YouTube channel tomorrow. I'll send links out to all WSA staff. And also students, if you take a look in the chat, there's a link to how you can be supported with your career by the Careers and Employability Service as you move forward on your journey. Thank you so much, Mike. That was really fantastic.
Thank you. I don't know if they're still listening. Any further questions, do chuck them in an email to me, and I will get around to answering them as soon as I can. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah. And be confident. Yeah. China and Chinese brands are the future.